The Hot 5 and 5. The Hot
Hello,
5
ladies
and
and
5.
gentlemen,
The Hot 5
and
and
welcome
5.
to the Hot 5 and 5 Jazz Jones interview. My name is Chris Hercules, and tonight we've got a great special guest. His name is DJ Brendan Boyle, and before I even go even further or deeper into this interview, I got a little blurb I want to read about Brendan. I just gotta say it because it sounds real nice. So here we go. Toronto native Brendan Boyle has over 15 years experience as a DJ, radio host, music blogger, event programmer, and entertainment administrator. His early loves for community radio, mixtape culture, and raving plunged him into the heart of Toronto's underground party scenes, where he had the opportunity to spin for many of its notable dance floors. Now, as a settled family man, he devotes his creative time to curating and sharing his jazzier records in his ever-expanding collection. He is greatly looking forward to playing them for all of us at a Jazz Jones show when we can all get together. So let's give it up for Brendan Boyle. I'm so happy to have you, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chris. And it's great to find people who are passionate about jazz and especially jazz of, I guess, a certain type that goes beyond kind of a stodgy academic approach or the same old that you might hear on the radio. So it's good to meet other adventuresome people that want to explore kind of the more interesting corners of the jazz universe.
Yeah, man, it's a pleasure to meet you as well. I want to ask you so many things. First thing I want to start off with is what got you interested in jazz? What was your first jazz album, or what caught your ear to get you into this music?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, I'm sure like Miles Davis's Kind of Blue was probably that first jazz album, that I knew really well. My sister was dating somebody who was a huge Miles Davis fan, and he passed that along. But it wasn't until probably I got into university that I kind of followed my musical interests in like drum and bass, house, disco, soul, jazz, kind of going back, through kind of a series of, samples and just kind of that lineage that got me into jazz. And I remember one Christmas just saying to my parents, like, can you get me, these dozen jazz CDs for Christmas? And, it was kind of like Coltrane's Giant Steps, Mingus, Herbie Hancock, Maiden Voyage, kind of staples, nothing unusual, but solid foundations. And then it just kind of went from there. I think Jason Palma got wind that I was interested in, jazz and funk and soul and rare groove and not just more commercial house, which is what I was spinning at the time. And he kind of opened up the door for kind of those deeper jazz sounds, and I just never looked back. Went from there.
Nice. And like, I was gonna ask you next, what other music genres were you exposed to? You were growing up, you said, house and drum and bass. And
yeah, that was more like my own discovery. Just kind of turning on the radio after midnight and hearing, those cutting edge DJs, filling up the global groove time slots on, Chin Radio when it flipped over, or listening to The Prophecy on CIUT, which, is still going strong. But growing up, my parents didn't really buy music, but the radio was always on. And it was either the classical station, CBC, which at that time I think only played like Stan Rogers, and Jazz FM. So it was definitely kind of in the air. My sister had a pretty great collection of cassettes, which she was kind enough to loan her younger brother. So, she got me into things like U2 and Pink Floyd, and she got me onto the Smashing Pumpkins when, they came out. I went to Catholic school, so I was in a choir, that sort of stuff. I mean, nothing particularly hip, right? But music nonetheless. And I just spent all of my money on music. I would cut lawns, walk dogs, babysit, and then the next day I was down at the music store buying CDs. And it didn't really matter what it was. I was just kind of hungry for everything. And then I realized at that time that I could buy music on record for much cheaper because everybody was dumping the records at that time. Everybody moved over to CDs. So instead of paying $25 for a CD, I could buy the same album for $7. So getting into records was a kind of an economical choice at the time, and it has turned into an economical disaster for me. At this point in my life.
Man, listen, I know exactly what you're talking about. There was moments in the 90s where I was spending $400 a week on vinyl, and I should have bought a condo looking back. But anyways,
I know. I'm still brown bagging my lunch so that I have money for records, right? You got to prioritize.
Yeah. My goodness, did you ever have the desire to pick up an instrument as well?
Definitely the desire to pick up an instrument. Instruments are expensive. Music lessons are expensive. It just kind of wasn't in the cards. And I think that's why I gravitated towards buying CDs. It's like I could turn all of my, measly pittance into music. And each one of those CDs or records was a music lesson for me. I still think that way, that every record that I buy, is a 45-minute music lesson. And it's an education. And so I'm thinking very seriously about taking up the bass. I think it's kind of an instrument that speaks to me, and it's rhythmic, it's melodic, it could be percussive, it's but it's also just kind of hanging out in the back, just making sure everybody's moving along, and that's kind of my vibe. I don't want to be up front.
Nice. What is your favorite subgenre of jazz?
I'll give two answers. And I'm reluctant to call either of them a subgenre, but really into dance floor jazz, which is not one genre, but kind of it's a sound found across everything, right? It's in hard bop, it's in the Latin stuff, the Brazilian stuff. It's just stuff that's got that rhythm and that groove. And some of it's not even that obvious. Some people say, "Oh, listen to this dance floor track." And I'll go, "That's not a dance floor track." And then they'll go, "Yeah, it is. Listen to the hi-hats." And you go, "Ah, yeah, it is a dance floor track." And it's just, it's nice to pull out kind of odd tracks that just kind of get people moving and get the party going. So, really, really like finding those gems kind of hidden in a record and being like, I can play this for other people. I can get a party moving with this. And then the second one, sometimes gets kind of grouped together as spiritual jazz, which, it kind of is a bit disrespectful to the variety within the music, but it's definitely kind of a period of jazz in the 70s where it's a lot of independent musicians making the music they want to make and self-publishing it. So these are people who are working outside of the label system and the record label or the radio system. A lot of it's like deeply personal, a lot of it's deeply political. It's kind of tied into, you know, all the movements coming out of Malcolm X, Pan-Africanism, and it's kind of music without boundaries and music without limits, and it's authentic music. It's music without compromise, and I think that's kind of where the best art is made, right? It's, you make art to tell your story, to tell your truth, and then somebody else creates their art in response. You know, it's not a label being like, well, you know, could you maybe do this because it's more commercial. So you get all sorts of arrangements that are just amazing, and just kind of the narratives and the stories. And you know, since they're not too concerned about commercialism or polite society, they don't pull any punches. So you know, it's Black music for the Black community. It's about their struggle and, you know, their desire for self-realization and better times ahead. You know, and I'm certainly not Black, but as an outsider, being able to hear those, you know, unvarnished truths, that's important, right? You know, that's educational, and it's not some sort of, you know, sugar-coated version of what's going on. You know, if you want to understand other people, it's important to hear them tell their truths. So yeah, for those reasons, I think it's very powerful music, and you know, and it's, since it kind of existed outside of these mainstream avenues, you know, I like to be able to find this sort of stuff and share it with other people.
Yeah, man. It's, you know, a lot of, and it's, you know, well, by you collecting it and digesting it, and when you do play it, you're educating minds, you know.
Yeah.
No matter, anytime you play that stuff, you never know if it's a coffee shop, if it's wherever, somebody says, oh man, what is this? You know, so it's always, you're being educated, and you're a teacher in essence by playing that music.
Absolutely. You know, it's not my music. I feel lucky enough to be a conduit, you know, to be able to bring it back to people's attention. You know, I don't want to hoard this stuff for me. You know, I want to keep this stuff in circulation. That's culture, right? That's keeping the stories going.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. I said in your bio, when I talked about the bio at the beginning of this interview, and it said that I said that you've been DJing for over 15 years. When did you exactly start DJing and collecting?
I mean, I think I always probably started collecting records in earnest probably around like 2003, 2004, started playing out around 2006. You know, I went to a lot of raves and parties, kind of late 90s, early 2000s, and, you know, spent kind of all of my money going to parties and buying mixtapes. And then, you know, going to too many parties isn't great for your health. So, you know, you got to take a step back. But, you know, I really miss the music. You know, I knew that it probably wasn't a good idea to get back into that scene, but I wanted to still engage with those sounds. You know, so I just started buying the records. I started buying all the stuff that I wanted to hear again. And that just kind of, you know, that just started me down the path. So started by playing house, and then that kind of got me into disco. And then, you know, I was playing a lot of like early hip hop, like party rap and like electro break stuff, kind of when the Queen West scene was blowing up, you know, like around 2006-ish. So yeah, playing that with a lot of kind of the newer French sounds coming out, and then that kind of ran its course, and I just was ready for the next phase of my life, but couldn't stop buying records. So started thinking a bit more about what sort of records am I going to want to listen to in 50 years, and it's jazz. It's infinitely rewarding. I can still listen to Miles Davis's Kind of Blue and go, oh, I never heard that before. Like that's high art, right? It's accessible, and it's forever. Every time you grow as a person and listen to it again, you get something more out of it. It's not a pop song with just a hook where you go, oh yeah, I get that, and that's all it has to offer.
Yes. It's much more deeper.
Yeah.
Much more
and I'll still, I'm not a musician, so I don't get any of the technical stuff. I don't go, oh, that's a really good subversion of, this expected chord structure. It's like, that's over my head. But but the fact that it can still move me without knowing that sort of stuff is great. Some of that like super academic art jazz, will never speak to me, and that's fine. It's not meant to speak to me. It's meant to speak to other musicians. But I like finding those pieces that can add something of value to everybody who listens.
I hear that, man. And on that same note, what do you think the future of jazz is, in your opinion?
I mean, I think it's good to acknowledge that the present of jazz is incredible. There's this incredible renaissance of jazz, really coming out of the UK, and parts of the States, like International Anthem out of Chicago, and then all the cats coming out of the UK. Greg Fote, Nubia Garcia, Shabaka and the Ancestors, like it's great. I mean, jazz is always alive. It's a genre of music that is always breaking new ground, and it's always inviting new things into the conversation. And even if you think of like fallow periods of jazz like the 1980s, it's like it was still doing stuff. It just might not have been your thing, or it might have been part of it's in academia, but then you've also got acid jazz, which is just going on. So I think we'll just kind of continue to see that sort of evolution of jazz. It's like jazz influenced hip hop, which influences jazz again. You've got people like Robert Glasper, working, Dilla samples and into his live sets. And you have these British guys that are kind of quoting the rhythmic structure of like the broken beat guys who were sampling from jazz as well. It just kind of keeps it, the conversation keeps evolving, right? It's like I said, you put your story and your message out there, and then the next person responds, and then it keeps going. And I think jazz just continues to be a fertile topic on which people can gather, and speak about and collaborate with. So I don't know what it's going to sound like. I'm excited, and I want it to sound like what the musicians who are making it want it to sound like. I don't want it to sound like jazz from 50 years ago. That already exists. That part of the conversation's been had. So, future's bright.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. Let's have a new conversation. And, it has to be all great artists play and create based on what's happening at the time.
Yeah.
So, you know.
I mean, imagine if Herbie Hancock never moved past Watermelon Man. And I mean like the early 60s Watermelon Man, you know, like what an incredible career. And it's because he has that open mind. Yeah. You know, if you've read his autobiography Possibilities, which is incredible, highly recommend. You know, it's all about what's possible and what's next, not, you know, what's the established norm or the history, or, you know, he's the polar opposite of the Wynton Marsalis who wants to like stay in the 1930s. You know, he's like, we don't live there anymore.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah. Sure, man. Listen, Brendan, it was a pleasure getting your insight on jazz. I really, really appreciated this. And I think a lot of other people that watch this interview will definitely also appreciate this. Is there anything else you want to say before we sign out?
I mean, I just want to thank Nigel and Jeremiah and Ron and the whole Molasses Wet Jazz Jones crew for, you know, tapping me on the shoulder and being like, hey, we're doing this thing. And, you know, we'd like you to contribute. So, you know, they were kind enough to ask me to do a mix for them, which will be out mid-March. So, you know, watch your usual virtual spaces for more information on that. And yeah, I hope my Hot 5 and 5 mix, you know, has a little bit of something for everyone, and you know, they like what they hear. And before we go, how do people get in contact with you? What's your Instagram? What's your Facebook? You got a Facebook group? You got a website? Yeah, best way to get a hold of me is for music stuff is through Instagram. Outer Time Inner Space, all one word, just like the Iman Jamal album. Outer Time Inner Space, and there's a really incredible jazz and record and music community on Instagram that manages to kind of cut through and cut out, you know, a lot of the noise on other social media platforms. So come find me there, and we'll share some good music. All right. Cool. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Once again, everybody watching, Brendan Boyle, his guest DJ mix will be appearing alongside DJ Ron Jon on Sunday, March 14th. That's the Hot 5 and 5 compilation mix on Sunday, March 14th at 5 p.m. on Mixcloud and Jazz Jones Facebook group. It's going to be on, the mix will be presented on Mixcloud and on the Jazz Jones Facebook group. This interview will be premiered on Friday, March 12th on YouTube, and of course the Jazz Jones Facebook group. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for watching. Don't forget, support live music when we can, support live music when that opportunity comes up again. And yeah, also support living jazz artists too, you know, living jazz artists, and support Jazz Jones. Find us, Jazz Jones Facebook group. Come be a part of something special and something new. All right. The Hot 5 and 5. 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 The Hot 5 and 5.